Hey, Dr. Britt here. Happy whatever day it is that you're listening to this. So, today I want to talk to you about something that's actually really, really important to me because it's something that I see people run into challenges with all the time. And it's something too that I have to practice in my own life on a pretty regular basis. So I want to ask you a couple of questions really to just get your brain thinking. Have you ever thought about something and became more and more mad the more that you thought about it? Or more and more sad the more that you thought about it? Have you ever thought about someone and the more you thought about what you didn't like about them, the more you didn't like them? Or the more you thought about something, the more anxiety that you had, or being afraid that you were going to miss the shot or the goal or whatever it was at a game, well, then you missed it. This is why we have to be intentional with what we rehearse. So stay with me because I'm really going to build this out for you. But I want you to really get this in your brain that we have to be intentional with what we rehearse. So I'm going to tell you a story about myself. I feel like I've been doing this lately, so, why not stay in that vein? Recently, I went to the airport. I was going to be gone for several days. So I packed protein and like an electrolyte powder in my carry-on. And by the way, I'm TSA pre-checked. This is important for you to know. So I'm going through, I've got on this dress. It's like a form fitting, and then I have a jacket over it. Why am I telling you this? Stay with me. It's going to matter in a minute. So anyways, I'm going through TSA and they pull my carry-on. Honestly, no big deal. I was like, great. They're going to do the swab thing and they're going to see that it's protein and electrolyte powder and it's going to be fine. Well, it wasn't fine because they swabbed it. It lit up. It became whatever happens, it had inorganic material according to them. So then I had to go stand in the middle. There's this, it's awful. There's this rectangle that I had to go stand in. I have no shoes on. They made me take off my jacket and it was cold in there. I'm warm natured, but it was a cold day. I think in Texas, it was actually 30s outside. The TSA area was incredibly cold. So I'm standing there, no shoes on, in my body fitting dress. I had to take off my jacket so my arms are exposed. And they asked me if I could stand in this place for more than if I could stand for 3 minutes. And of course I can stand for 3 minutes. Gratefully, some people can. So I could stand for 3 minutes. And I was like, do I really have to take off all of these things? I'm TSA pre-check. And she was like, yeah, you do, because pre-check doesn't matter anymore because your stuff lit up. I'm like, whatever. So I'm standing there and I'm feeling really annoyed. And that's really the truth, is I was feeling really annoyed that I was having to go through this, it was super inconvenient. I'm like, here I am just trying to travel healthy, make sure that I'm getting enough protein because I'm about to be in a hotel for 8 days and it's hard to eat really clean sometimes. And so I'm going, okay, here I'm trying to do these things. And I'm my annoyance is growing. And I know that I did not have a happy camper face. I wasn't and I wasn't trying to be happy about it. I'm not a terrorist. So I'm watching them do this thing. And then they do another test, and whatever other test that they do, that lit up too. And so here I am going, Lord have mercy. Who knows? I bought my electrolytes off of Amazon. This is super clean, has all of these mushrooms and adaptogens and all these things and my protein. It's a vegan protein. So I'm going, man, who knows what's in it that lit up? And they're getting more and more sort of like, oh, who is this person that's standing there? And I'm getting more and more irritated just going, this is freaking protein. And stay with me because this really matters. So my state was not in a good place. I was really frustrated. Normally I'm going to have a smile and I'm going to be kind. And I was still kind, but I was not smiling. And I was really frustrated. I went from annoyed to frustrated watching them do this thing. I'm watching them also make phone calls. And finally, and I've been standing here for definitely longer than 3 minutes. I don't know how long though. And one of the ladies comes up and she begins to pat me down. And I'm like visibly bothered for sure. And in my mind, the word, this feels violating, showed up. And she's patting me down and she is all up in the underwire of my bra, like touching my side boob, all the things. Like, I'm just being honest. You're my best friend. So I'm just telling you how this is going down. She's all up in me because I have this like inorganic, whatever that means, material on my stuff. So as that word goes through my head, I thought about it and it started to show up more. And she looked up at me and she was like, would you like to be patted down in private? Probably should have asked me that first, but she was like, would you like to be patted down in private? And I was like, that'd be nice. Like, because it felt so like somebody that I don't know, that I don't want to be touching me is touching me. And if you've ever had this experience, you know what I'm talking about. So she's like running her hands all over my body, and before we get there, and I was like, that'd be nice. And she was like, well, I'm going to have to take you to a back room and I need to get another person. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that sounds like it's going to take forever. Just do it. Like, I just wanted to be done. I just wanted it to be over with. So then at one point, her hands were like all the way up in my, all the way up my thighs into areas that I really don't want anybody else's hands that I haven't given permission to be there. So uncomfortable, so violating. So finally, when she was done, I was like, can I put my jacket back on? It's so cold. And by this time now, my luggage has been cleared. It's over to the right, but still had to pat me down just in case. Violate me, truly. And the lady next to me, or the next TSA lady that was over by my luggage was like, you can repack everything, because they unpack it, but they don't pack it back for you. She was like, you can repack everything, thank you for being so, I can't remember a word. It was something like polite or calm or something like that. And by the way, being not calm in situations like this will benefit no one. So anyways, I was like, listen, like, I guess, but that was really violating. And this time I hadn't just thought the word, I said it out loud. And I wanted them to know that it was violating. And by the way, I think probably for most TSA agents, this is not like a great part of their job. But the word violating came out of my mouth. And I felt that word all over my body. And like, I might cry. That's how I felt. Like, I might cry. And I packed up all my stuff. I got my shoes back on. I had my jacket on. And I was walking off. And I continued to feel that tinge of, oh my gosh, I think I'm going to cry. Like, if I sat down somewhere, I think I would cry. And I called my husband and I began to tell him about this experience and feeling like, oh my goodness, like that felt so violating to me. I'm going to cry. And that was the third time I said that word. And I remember vividly going, Brittany, you cannot continue to rehearse this word. Because every time I said it, because this is a label, violating is a label that I have now labeled the experience that I had, because I had somebody touching my body in ways that I did not want them to be touching my body. And honestly, like, if you think about it, it's like you have no choice. So I just take that. You just take that. So I consciously said, Brittany, you cannot continue to rehearse this word. And I was like, okay, talking to myself, and I was like, okay, self, that did not feel good. It did feel violating, and we're done using that word. We're done using that word. It was uncomfortable. It didn't feel good. Not the way you wanted to start your trip, fine. But we're not going to continue to rehearse that word, because I felt it in my body viscerally getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And it wasn't that there would have been anything wrong with tears. It wasn't that it was wrong. I want to be clear. It wasn't that it was wrong that I felt that way. I honestly think I was right to feel that way. It was a rightful feeling. And the meaning, the label of that, the more that I rehearsed that, the deeper it was going to become. So I wanted to stop that. If you've ever been in a situation like this, you know what I'm talking about. It is not good. So afterwards, I told myself I got a coffee. I finally actually got to have a conversation with my husband, and I felt my limbic system calming down. I continued to not use the violating word. I just described the experience, that I didn't like it, and like what it connected to for me. I was making some other meanings of it and connecting it to other things and going, this makes sense. Because the body remembers things that the brain consciously does not remember. And that's why a label is so important. That's why the meaning is so important. So we have to be really careful with that. So I want to give you a little bit of instruction for what to do when you're in a situation where you know that rehearsing whatever it is on repeat is not going to benefit you. And so really, this is anything negative. Again, I want to be really clear. I am not pro avoidance. I am not pro pretend, unless I'm playing pretend with my child. I am not pro avoidance. So the first part is that we actually have to acknowledge any negative feeling associated with what it is that we want to rehearse. So I want to say that again. We have to acknowledge any negative feeling associated with what we want to rehearse. I felt violated. I think there's sadness that comes with that. I think there's anger that comes with that. And so I had to really acknowledge that that's where I was at, and that it was okay. It wasn't wrong. That likely many other people in my shoes would feel the same way that I felt. So I had to just acknowledge it. Then you have to be careful with labels. I think, by the way, if I had originally just stayed with annoying or frustrating or uncomfortable even, that the depth of the feeling that I had or the connection that I was making wouldn't have happened, because the word violating means something to me. It is a label that connects to other things. Then I needed to be kind to myself about it. To go, okay, listen, it's okay. It's really okay that you feel this way. This is connected into acceptance. But that, I take another pass at that. I accept it. I'm careful with labels. And then I take another pass at that kindness of just acknowledging my own personhood in that sort of a situation. Then I determined in myself that I wasn't going to rehearse it. I know the power of rehearsal. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute. I made a decision in myself that I was not going to rehearse it. I relabeled the situation, and then I redirected my thoughts. While I was standing in line to get my $6 cup of coffee, I was thinking about how grateful I was that I live in a country that I can get a $6 cup of coffee and that it's ordered to the way that I like it. I was going through all of these things. I was grateful that the situation wasn't worse. I began to walk through these things, that I have a husband that it was going to talk with me and process with me about it. I was grateful for those things. And so that is really important when you find yourself in a situation that you just want to rehearse over and over and over, that you need to avoid that. You need to avoid rehearsal like the plague. Remember some of the questions that I asked you in the beginning, that when you think about something over and over and over, you become more and more mad, more and more sad. The more you thought about it, the more you rehearsed it, the more you didn't like the person, the more intense the anxiety, the missing shots, missing goals, those sorts of things. This, friend, is why we must be intentional with what we rehearse. You must be intentional with what you rehearse. Now, rehearsal is not only negative. We want to be intentional with rehearsing the positives. Typically, unless you have a practice of this in your life, this is an area that you can really grow in, because most people have a tendency to focus on, rehearse, and ruminate over the negatives, but they avoid focusing and rehearsing on the positives. So one of the ways that you do that is you direct your focus. And a couple of episodes ago, I talked about going into my daughter's bedroom, and that when she saw me, she was like, "Mommy!" And that I replayed that over and over and over again in my mind, because repetition was important with that. I replayed it over and over. So you want to direct your focus to that thing. Also, there's this really amazing concept called anchoring, and we anchor to things all the time. And maybe I'll do another podcast on that, but I want to talk to you about anchoring a feeling specifically. So a lot of people, if you're watching me, use their knuckles to anchor feelings. And you can choose anyone you want. You can choose your wrist. You could even, like, on your jawline or whatever. You can use any part of your body, because your body is always with you. I just recommend hands because they're on the sneak. So if you have anchors in your body, when you press on that anchor, you will begin to feel the feeling that's anchored with that. So if that feeling that I had of excitement or love with my daughter, anchoring that, pressing on my knuckle, thinking about it, pressing on it at the height of the feeling that I have, anchors it. And what you want to do is have a practice of anchoring good feelings so that you can stack them. Whenever you have a good feeling, you just press on that knuckle, you're present in the moment, or you come back to it and you rehearse it. You think about it. You come back to the height of that feeling and you press on the knuckle. There's so much power in anchoring. And so you want to anchor this feeling in your knuckle so you can come back to it. And you repeat it. And you repeat this process over and over and over again, because what you are doing is telling your conscious mind to record, and your unconscious mind will recall and bring these things back really regularly. So I want you to have a pattern in your life of intentionality in your rehearsal. You want to remember, friend, that it is so important that we rehearse the things that we want to make sure that we remember, and we don't rehearse the things that are going to take away from our life, that are going to damage, that are, like, the more that we think about them, the worse we're going to feel. And that's such a part of repetition too. Just like positive anchoring, that's a repetition of I have this good feeling and I'm going to anchor it. And I have this good feeling and I'm going to anchor it. That we want to be careful that we don't have repetition in the things that we don't want to have repetition in. For example, sometimes people say stupid things, by the way. Since I'm your friend and I'm not your therapist or your counselor, I can say that this is stupid. That people say things like bad things always happen to me. Well, the more that you rehearse that, the more you begin to look for that, the more you see those things really show up in your life and you're like, see, Stephen, this is what I'm saying. Bad things always happen to me, rather than that being a coincidence or like, that's just a part of life. Sometimes things don't feel good, rather than the label, bad things always happen to me. Avoid like the plague. And then with that, there's a labeling. When we label, we begin to link. When we label, just like I used the word violating, when I labeled that experience as that, what it did was link to all of my past memories, all of my past experiences of the word violating. And so it didn't just stack, by the way. It didn't just stack on the thing that one instance. It recalled all the others. And that's because our negative emotions are temporal. They're stored in time. And so we can actually go back to them. Positive emotions are atemporal. I'll talk about that another time. But our negative emotions are temporal. So it began to stack over and over and over and over the times that I felt violated. That's why I could feel it in my body. When I said that word aloud, I wanted to cry almost immediately, and I felt it in my body. It linked to the other things. So friend, what I want to leave you with, what I want to remind you is that you have a lot more control over your mind, over the direction of your thoughts than you even realize. You just have to be committed to rehearsing what's positive and not what's negative. We avoid rehearsing what's negative. We pursue rehearsing what's positive. The more you rehearse it, the more you'll have it in your life. Whatever it is, positive or negative, the more you rehearse it, the more you will have it in your life. And I don't know about you, but I want a lot of positivity in my life. And I want friends in my life that rehearse positive things on a regular basis. So as per our usual, I want to leave you with a couple of questions. What have you been rehearsing negatively that you know you need to stop rehearsing? What labels do you need to throw out altogether? For example, if there's a charge around angry, then maybe you need to say something like peeved, bothered. What labels do you need to throw out altogether? And finally, what feeling do you need to anchor in on a regular basis? Best friend, it was great hanging with you. I want you to know that you continuing to come hang out with me is so meaningful. I look forward to our time together, and I can't wait for our next one. So I will talk to you soon.